And we're live on match day as Doug reaches for a buffalo wing. He's got it! Oh, and he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! What a finish! There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi.
Where is Daredevil?
I'm right here. Don't miss the return of Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again.
So what's next?
I feel liberated.
We're gonna take this city back.
Over medicated.
In an all-new season, now streaming only on Disney+.
They're hunting us. It's time we started hunting them.
I can work with that.
This should be tons of fun.
Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, now streaming only on Disney+.
On a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, rising above the surrounding plains of Şanlıurfa, lies a site that has transformed our understanding of prehistory, Göbekli Tepe. Today, the name is synonymous with mystery, controversy, and a rewriting of human chronology. But when a local farmer first stumbled across carved stones protruding from the soil in the 1960s, few could have imagined that this barren mound concealed the oldest known monumental structures in the world. The story of Göbekli Tepe begins not with its grandeur, but with neglect. In 1963, a joint survey by Istanbul University and the University of Chicago identified the mound as an archaeological site, but it was classified simply as a Byzantine cemetery. Broken flints and scattered stone fragments suggested prehistoric occupation, yet nothing indicated the presence of vast megalithic enclosures. For decades, the mound lay ignored, its secrets hidden beneath soil and erosion. It was not until 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute visited the site, that its true significance began to emerge. Schmidt, familiar with other Neolithic sites in the region, immediately recognized the distinctive shape of large limestone fragments. He suspected that the mound concealed something extraordinary. Stone pillars unlike anything previously known from the early Neolithic. Excavations began the following year, and what emerged stunned the world. Massive T-shaped megaliths, some weighing 10 to 20 tons, arranged in circular enclosures. The scale and sophistication of the architecture were unlike anything else from that period. The central pillars stood over 5 meters tall, flanked by smaller stones in carefully aligned circles. Many were carved with intricate reliefs of animals: lions, scorpions, foxes, snakes, vultures, boars, rendered with an artistry that suggested a deep symbolic tradition. Some pillars even bore abstract symbols, including the enigmatic H motif, repeated across multiple stones. The quality of workmanship was breathtaking, and its implications profound. Radiocarbon dating of organic material, found in association with the enclosures, placed the earliest phases of construction around 9,600 BCE, a staggering 11,600 years ago. To put this in perspective, Göbekli Tepe was already ancient when Stonehenge was built. It predates the Great Pyramids of Giza by 7 millennia. At the time, its first enclosures were raised. Agriculture was only beginning to emerge in the fertile Crescent. Conventional wisdom held that monumental architecture was the product of settled farming societies with surpluses to support specialist labor. Yet Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, or by people on the cusp of farming, who somehow organized the labor, knowledge, and artistry required to quarry, carve, transport, and erect massive stones. This discovery overturned one of the central assumptions of archaeology, that agriculture came first and monuments followed. Instead, Göbekli Tepe suggested the reverse. Here were hunter-gatherers gathering seasonally in large numbers, pooling resources, and constructing vast ceremonial centers. Some archaeologists have argued that the very process of building Göbekli Tepe may have stimulated the adoption of agriculture, as groups needed to organize food production to support such projects. Monumentality, once thought a byproduct of farming, may instead have been the catalyst for farming itself. The excavation history reveals layer upon layer of complexity. At least 20 enclosures have been identified through ground-penetrating radar, though only a handful have been fully excavated. The earliest and largest belong to what archaeologists call Layer 3, dating from roughly 9,600 to 8,800 BCE. These contain the iconic T-shaped pillars arranged in circles up to 20 meters in diameter. Later phases, designated Layer 2, are smaller, less ambitious enclosures, built between 8,800 and 8,200 BCE. The sequence suggests a long tradition of building and rebuilding, spanning more than a millennium. Then mysteriously, the entire site was deliberately buried around 8,000 BCE, entombed beneath tons of soil and debris. Whether this was an act of reverence, abandonment, or suppression remains unknown. But it preserved the enclosures in remarkable condition for millennia. What makes Göbekli Tepe so revolutionary is not merely its age, but its symbolism. The carved animals are not random. They appear to encode a worldview in which certain species held deep meaning. Vultures, for example, are frequently depicted, often in association with human figures. Some scholars connect this to the practice of excarnation, where bodies were left exposed to birds before burial. Others see astronomical significance. Vultures as symbols of the constellation Sagittarius, snakes as Hydra, scorpions as Scorpius. The possibility that Göbekli Tepe functioned as a kind of stone sky map has inspired both mainstream and alternative interpretations, though definitive proof remains elusive. Among the most intriguing features are the anthropomorphic central pillars. Each T-shape may represent a stylized human form. Some bear carved arms, hands, and belts, suggesting that they are not abstract but personified beings, perhaps deities, ancestors, or mythical figures. If true, then Göbekli Tepe is not merely an architectural wonder, but the earliest known temple complex, a place where humans gathered to commune with the divine. Schmidt himself described it as the world's first cathedral on a hill, a place of ritual that predated cities, writing, and kings. The implications reverberated through archaeology. If hunter-gatherers could organize such projects, then the boundary between primitive and civilized blurred. Human capacity for symbolic thought, social coordination, and monumental architecture clearly extended back further than anyone had believed. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe serves as a proof of concept for the mother culture hypothesis. It demonstrates that advanced construction, artistry, and ritual did not require the full package of agriculture, writing, and urbanism. These traits could appear independently, under the right circumstances, even in deep antiquity. Yet the site also raises troubling questions. Why was it built at all? Monumental construction requires enormous effort, far beyond subsistence needs. It implies surplus, leadership, and shared vision. But for hunter-gatherers, surplus was fleeting and leadership fragile. How then did groups scattered across the Fertile Crescent converge on this hill to build such structures? Was Göbekli Tepe a seasonal pilgrimage site, drawing bands together for ritual and feasting? Or was it the legacy of a more organized tradition, a survival of knowledge from an earlier, forgotten culture? The deliberate burial of the site complicates matters further. Unlike abandoned villages that decay naturally, Göbekli Tepe was intentionally covered with debris. This was no accident of erosion. It was an act requiring immense labor. Was it an attempt to preserve the sanctity of the site, to seal it away for posterity? Or was it a rejection, perhaps following a cultural or religious shift? Some have suggested that younger generations, adopting agriculture and new ways of life, buried the monuments of their ancestors as part of a transition to a different worldview. Whatever the reason, the act ensured that the enclosures remained hidden until our own era, preserved like a time capsule of humanity's first monumental experiment. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe rippled far beyond archaeology. It captured the imagination of the public, spawning books, documentaries, and debates about lost civilizations. Alternative historians seized upon it as evidence that advanced societies existed before the Holocene, their knowledge surviving in fragments. Mainstream archaeologists countered that the site could be explained entirely within the framework of late hunter-gatherer societies, experimenting with ritual and social complexity. Both sides agreed on one thing: Göbekli Tepe was a game changer. It proved that our timeline of human development was far from complete. The site also underscored the importance of overlooked landscapes. For decades, archaeologists had focused on Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Levant as the cradles of civilization. The barren hills of southeastern Turkey were peripheral, unpromising. Yet it was here, on a forgotten mound, that the oldest temple in the world lay hidden. This raises an unsettling question. How many other Göbekli Tepes lie undiscovered, buried beneath soil, forest, or sea? If one such site survived, surely others exist. Our failure to find them may say less about their absence than about our limited search. In retrospect, the rediscovery of Göbekli Tepe feels almost inevitable, as if history itself was waiting to be rewritten. But we must remember how easily it could have remained unknown. Had Schmidt not recognized the significance of the stones, in 1994, the mound might still be considered a medieval cemetery. The greatest revolution in archaeology in decades began not with certainty, but with curiosity. The willingness to ask whether the fragments in the soil hinted at something more. That lesson resonates across the entire inquiry of this podcast. Göbekli Tepe is not Atlantis. It is not the smoking gun of a forgotten global civilization. But it is a proof of possibility, an undeniable demonstration that humanity, even in the aftermath of the Ice Age, was capable of feats far beyond what the orthodox timeline allowed. Its radiocarbon dates push monumental architecture back to the dawn of the Holocene. Its symbolism suggests a sophisticated worldview. Its very existence shows that the line between hunter-gatherer and civilization is far blurrier than once thought. For those who seek the ghosts of the Ice Age, Göbekli Tepe is a beacon, lighting the path into a past both deeper and stranger than we ever imagined. If the sheer scale of Göbekli Tepe's architecture forces us to rethink the abilities of hunter-gatherer societies, the symbolism carved into its stones deepens the enigma. Far from crude decoration, the reliefs on Göbekli Tepe's pillars suggest a deliberate iconography, a language of images that hints at complex mythologies, rituals, and perhaps even astronomical knowledge. The site is not merely an architectural marvel. It is a vast stone text, its message written in the forms of animals, abstract symbols, and anthropomorphic figures. The animals dominate the carvings. Lions, bulls, foxes, wild boar, gazelles, snakes, scorpions, spiders, cranes, vultures, and wild asses all appear across the enclosures. The variety of species represented suggests that the builders carefully selected creatures that carried symbolic weight, rather than simply depicting the fauna of their environment. Indeed, some animals are conspicuously absent. Fish, for instance, are virtually unknown in the carvings, despite the nearby rivers. This selective imagery implies that the pillars encode a worldview structured by symbolic, rather than purely naturalistic choices. Consider the vultures, which appear repeatedly. On Pillar 43, the so-called vulture stone, a large bird of prey stands beside a headless human figure, while above them float enigmatic symbols, a sphere, a crescent, and abstract shapes. Many scholars interpret this scene as a representation of excarnation, the practice of leaving bodies exposed to birds before burial, a custom well attested in later Near Eastern cultures. The vulture, a creature that mediates between death and the heavens, may have symbolized the soul's ascent. Others suggest that the imagery connects to celestial phenomena, with the vulture representing a constellation and the floating sphere symbolizing the sun or a star. The scorpion also recurs, carved with striking precision. Its presence has prompted speculation about an astronomical dimension, perhaps referencing the constellation Scorpius. Likewise, snakes slithering across several pillars evoke Hydra, the great serpent constellation. Some researchers argue that the assemblage of animals may form a kind of star map, encoding the night sky as it appeared around 10,000 BCE. The H motif, repeated across different stones, has been interpreted by some as a symbol of the solstices or equinoxes, marking the axis of the heavens. Though these interpretations remain controversial, the very fact that they are plausible underscores the sophistication of the imagery. The possibility that Göbekli Tepe functioned as an observatory as well as a temple has excited both mainstream archaeologists and alternative historians. The layout of the enclosures, with central pillars flanked by rings of stones, resembles later monumental traditions that incorporated celestial alignments, Stonehenge, for example, or the pyramids of Giza. Some studies claim that the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe align with the rising of specific stars or constellations, such as Sirius. If true, this would make Göbekli Tepe the oldest known astronomical site in the world, predating Nabta Playa in Egypt and other archaeoastronomical landmarks by millennia. The astronomical hypothesis took a dramatic turn with the controversial interpretation of the vulture stone as a record of a cosmic catastrophe. In 2017, a study argued that the arrangement of animals corresponded to constellations and that the scene depicted a comet impact around 10,900 BCE, linked to the Younger Dryas cooling event. According to this interpretation, the monument was both a sky map and a memorial to a global cataclysm that reshaped the world. While many archaeologists dismiss this as speculative, the idea illustrates the depth of meaning scholars seek in Göbekli Tepe's carvings. Whether or not the comet theory is correct, it highlights the possibility that the site encoded not just myth, but history remembered in symbolic form. Equally compelling are the anthropomorphic features of the T-shaped pillars. Two of the largest central pillars in Enclosure D bear carved arms and hands, suggesting that they represent stylized human forms. Belts and loincloths are also depicted, reinforcing their identity as anthropomorphic beings. Who then were these stone colossi meant to represent? Deities, ancestors, culture heroes. If the pillars are personifications, then Göbekli Tepe may not simply be a temple, but a pantheon in stone, a gathering of gods or ancestors standing in eternal vigil. The absence of domestic architecture at the site supports this interpretation. Göbekli Tepe was not a settlement, but a sacred complex, a place of gathering, ritual, and myth-making. The symbolism is not limited to animals and humans. Abstract symbols also appear: circles, crescents, the aforementioned H motif, and other geometric designs. These may represent celestial objects, calendrical notations, or abstract concepts lost to us. The repetition of certain motifs across different enclosures suggests a coherent symbolic system, perhaps even a proto-script. While it is unlikely that Göbekli Tepe represents writing in the conventional sense, It may foreshadow the symbolic systems that later emerged in Mesopotamia and Egypt. What unites all this imagery is its coherence. Göbekli Tepe is not a random collection of carvings, but a structured symbolic landscape. The enclosures may have served as stages for ritual drama, each stone a participant in a cosmic story. The animal reliefs could represent clans, tribes, or totems, gathering under the gaze of anthropomorphic deities. Alternatively, they could encode the cycles of the heavens, with rituals timed to solstices, equinoxes, or star risings. Whatever the precise meaning, the carvings reveal a society deeply invested in symbolism, ritual, and cosmology, far beyond what we once thought possible for the 10th millennium BCE. The paradox is striking. Hunter-gatherers built temples before they built villages. The site contains no permanent dwellings, no evidence of daily domestic life. Instead, it appears to have been a pilgrimage center where bands of people converged seasonally to build, feast, and worship. Archaeological evidence of animal bones suggests massive feasting, with gazelles, aurochs, and wild boar consumed in great numbers. Stone basins may have been used for brewing beer, hinting at ritual intoxication. These gatherings would have reinforced social bonds, transmitted myths, and coordinated cooperation on a scale unprecedented for mobile groups. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe may represent the birthplace of organized religion. The first time humans gathered in large numbers, not just to survive, but to worship. The deliberate burial of the site adds yet another layer of symbolism. Was this an act of reverence, entombing the sacred structures as one might a revered ancestor? Or was it an act of rejection, sealing away the old ways in favor of a new agricultural lifestyle? If Göbekli Tepe encoded memories of a cosmic catastrophe, perhaps the burial represented closure, a way of drawing a line under a traumatic past. The act of burying the site may itself have been a ritual, a final performance in the long drama enacted on the hill. For proponents of the mother culture hypothesis, the symbolism of Göbekli Tepe is particularly significant. It suggests continuity with later mythologies across the world: sky gods and earth goddesses, animal totems, cosmic cycles. The anthropomorphic pillars resonate with later depictions of divine figures in Mesopotamia and Egypt. The vulture and scorpion motifs echo symbols that persist in later iconographies. Even if Göbekli Tepe was not a direct ancestor of later civilizations, it may represent a shared symbolic inheritance, a cultural reservoir from which multiple traditions drew. Critics caution against over-interpretation. They argue that the carvings may be simple representations of important animals, not constellations or myths. They note that without written texts, we cannot be sure what the symbols meant to their creators. To project later mythologies onto the site risks circular reasoning. Yet even these critics admit that the carvings show a level of symbolic sophistication unparalleled at the time. Whether or not the vultures were constellations, the very fact that people 11,000 years ago invested such effort in carving them proves a worldview rich in meaning. Ultimately, the symbolism of Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask profound questions about human cognition. Why did people carve these animals, raise these pillars, and gather on this hill? What compelled them to build a site that would outlast their own lifetimes, perhaps intended for generations yet unborn? Such acts suggest not just symbolic thought, but a sense of history, an awareness that their creations mattered beyond the immediate moment. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe represents the dawn of historical consciousness. The first time humans inscribed their myths, not just in memory, but in stone. The paradox of Göbekli Tepe lies not simply in its antiquity, nor even in the complexity of its carvings, but in the identity of its builders. According to conventional archaeology, the people of southeastern Anatolia around 9,000 600 BCE, were hunter-gatherers. They lived in small mobile bands, subsisting on wild game and plants, without domesticated animals, without permanent houses, and without agriculture. Such groups are not expected to build megaliths, weighing many tons, arranged in circular enclosures, decorated with elaborate symbolism. Yet Göbekli Tepe exists, and with it the unsettling question: how did hunter-gatherers achieve what later farming civilizations took millennia to develop? To grasp the scale of the paradox, we must remember what monumental construction entails. Each of Göbekli Tepe's T-shaped pillars was quarried from the local limestone bedrock. The largest pillars stand over 5 meters tall and weigh up to 20 tons. Quarrying, transporting, and erecting such stones requires not just brute strength, but careful planning, coordination, and engineering knowledge. Modern experiments suggest that even with simple tools, moving such stones would demand teams of dozens, if not hundreds of people working in concert. These teams would need food, water, and shelter, implying logistical organization far beyond the needs of small foraging bands. Archaeological evidence confirms that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not yet full-fledged farmers. The faunal remains at the site are overwhelmingly from wild species: gazelles, wild boar, aurochs, rather than domesticated animals. Plant remains likewise indicate reliance on wild cereals and fruits, though genetic studies suggest that the region was home to wild ancestors of domesticated wheat and barley. In other words, the people who built Göbekli Tepe were perched at the threshold of the Neolithic Revolution, but had not yet crossed it. They were still foragers, but ones with extraordinary social and symbolic ambitions. How could such people mobilize the labor needed to build Göbekli Tepe? One theory emphasizes seasonal aggregation. For much of the year, hunter-gatherer bands lived separately, following migratory herds and seasonal plants. But at certain times, perhaps aligned with the rhythms of animal migrations or celestial events, these groups converged on sacred sites for ritual gatherings. At Göbekli Tepe, they may have assembled by the hundreds or thousands, feasting on game, brewing fermented drinks and participating in communal rituals. Such events would have reinforced alliances, exchanged knowledge, and created a shared cultural identity. Monumental construction may have been both the product and the symbol of these gatherings, a collective project that bound disparate groups into a community. This model finds parallels in later cultures. The Native American mound builders of the Mississippi Valley, for example, constructed vast ceremonial centers like Cahokia, supported by seasonal gatherings. Likewise, in Polynesia, dispersed islanders built monumental structures as focal points for ritual and identity. In each case, monumentality served as a glue, binding mobile or semi-sedentary peoples together. Göbekli Tepe may represent the earliest known instance of this pattern, a ritual center for hunter-gatherers, prefiguring the temples, ziggurats, and pyramids of later civilizations. Yet the scale and ambition of Göbekli Tepe pushed this model to its limits. Seasonal gatherings explain the feasting and ritual, but do they fully explain the engineering? Quarrying and shaping 20-ton stones is not an occasional pastime. It suggests a sustained effort, with knowledge passed down across generations. The precision of the carvings, the repeated use of specific motifs, and the complex layering of enclosures all indicate a long-term tradition, not ad hoc construction. If Göbekli Tepe was the product of seasonal gatherings, then those gatherings were far more sophisticated, organized, and enduring than previously thought possible. This is where proponents of the mother culture hypothesis see an opening. They argue that Göbekli Tepe may not have been an isolated experiment by hunter-gatherers, but the survival of knowledge from an earlier, forgotten tradition. According to this view, the end of the Ice Age destroyed advanced cultures. but fragments of their knowledge persisted among survivors. These survivors, scattered across the Fertile Crescent, may have preserved techniques of stoneworking, symbolic traditions, and cosmological knowledge, even as their material circumstances reverted to foraging. Göbekli Tepe, in this reading, is not an anomaly, but a memory, a re-expression of lost wisdom in a diminished world. The idea resonates with global myths of culture bringers, gods or sages, who appear after cataclysms to teach humanity agriculture, astronomy, and religion. In Mesopotamian lore, Oannes emerged from the sea to instruct humans in the arts of civilization. In the Andes, Viracocha wandered among the people, raising them from darkness. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl brought maize and law. Could Göbekli Tepe be the material reflection of such myths? The place where survivors of a cataclysm rebuilt fragments of their lost world. Mainstream archaeology balks at such interpretations, yet the persistence of the idea reflects the site's power to provoke. To place Göbekli Tepe in its broader context, we must consider the Neolithic transition in the Fertile Crescent. Within a few centuries of the site's construction, agriculture emerged in the surrounding regions. Genetic studies of einkorn, wheat, suggest that domestication began near Karaka Dağ, just 30 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe, around 9,500 BCE. Sheep and goats were domesticated soon after. Was this coincidence or causation? Did the demands of feeding large gatherings at Göbekli Tepe drive people to cultivate cereals more systematically? Some archaeologists believe so, arguing that ritual feasts required quantities of food that wild resources alone could not provide. In this sense, religion may have given birth to agriculture, not the other way around. The implications are profound. If monumental ritual centers preceded farming, then the traditional model of subsistence first, culture second collapses. Instead, symbolic and religious needs may have spurred economic innovation. Göbekli Tepe would thus represent not the end of the hunter-gatherer era, but the crucible in which the Neolithic revolution was forged. The paradox of hunter-gatherer megalith builders dissolves if we see culture, not subsistence, as the driving force of change. Yet even this explanation leaves questions. Why bury the site after centuries of use? Why abandon the tradition of T-shaped pillars, never to be built again? If Göbekli Tepe catalyzed agriculture, why did its monumental culture vanish, just as farming took hold? These puzzles fuel speculation that the site was not simply a product of its time, but the last expression of something older. Perhaps the people who built it were heirs to a deeper tradition, one unsustainable in the new agricultural world. By burying their temples, they closed a chapter that no longer fit the emerging order. Whether we view Göbekli Tepe as a seasonal gathering site or as a relic of a lost tradition, one fact is inescapable. It changes the narrative of human history. The neat sequence of foragers to farmers to villages to temples is no longer tenable. Instead, the sequence is tangled, with symbols and rituals driving innovations, and with monumental construction appearing at the dawn of the Neolithic, not its culmination. Göbekli Tepe stands as a testament to the fact that humans have always been more than subsistence machines. Even before agriculture, they dreamed, built, and reached for the heavens. For archaeologists, Göbekli Tepe is both exhilarating and frustrating. Exhilarating because it opens a window into a forgotten world of monumental ritual 12,000 years ago. Frustrating because the site offers no texts, no clear answers, only symbols carved in stone. We are left to interpret, speculate, and argue. Was it a temple, an observatory, a ritual theatre, or a memorial to catastrophe? Perhaps it was all of these, or something we cannot even imagine. The paradox remains. Hunter-gatherers are not supposed to build temples, yet they did. Whether by seasonal gathering, inherited knowledge, or sheer innovation, the people of Göbekli Tepe achieved what textbooks said was impossible. In doing so, they left us with a mystery that challenges the foundations of our understanding. To walk among the pillars today is to feel the presence of minds every bit as complex as our own. Minds that lived in a world both alien and familiar. The ghosts of the Ice Age whisper through the carvings, telling us that the story of civilization did not begin where we thought. It began here, on a hill in Turkey, long before the first cities rose from the plains. The meaning of Göbekli Tepe remains as elusive as its discovery was revolutionary. Archaeologists and theorists alike have struggled to explain why hunter-gatherers would have devoted such immense energy to raising circles of megaliths, decorated with animal reliefs and anthropomorphic forms, on a barren hilltop. The material facts, the radiocarbon dates, the carved pillars, the deliberate burial, are known. But their interpretation is a battlefield of competing theories, each illuminating one facet of the mystery, while leaving others unresolved. The most widely accepted explanation sees Göbekli Tepe as a ritual center, a sacred gathering place where disparate bands of foragers came together for seasonal ceremonies. The lack of domestic architecture supports this view. There are no houses, hearths, or refuse middens of the kind associated with villages. Instead, the site is dominated by enclosures, animal bones, and evidence of feasting. Scholars suggest that Göbekli Tepe may have functioned as a sanctuary, where people performed rites of death, fertility, and cosmic renewal. The vulture imagery, combined with headless human figures, suggests rituals linked to death and the soul's journey. In this interpretation, Göbekli Tepe was the world's first temple, a communal place where humans confronted the mysteries of life and death, earth and sky. Yet even as a ritual center, Göbekli Tepe raises questions. Why here on this hill? Why such monumental ambition? The effort required to quarry, transport, and erect 20-ton pillars exceeds the practical needs of any ritual. It suggests not merely worship, but competitive display, an escalation in which groups sought to outdo one another in devotion and spectacle. Such dynamics are familiar in later societies, where temples, pyramids, and cathedrals became arenas of prestige. At Göbekli Tepe, the impulse appears at the dawn of monumental architecture itself, hinting that status, rivalry, and symbolic display were forces shaping society long before kings and priests formalized them. Another theory emphasizes Göbekli Tepe's role as a social glue. Hunter-gatherers, by nature, live in small mobile groups. Such groups face challenges of cooperation beyond the band level. How do hundreds of strangers from different clans maintain alliances, avoid conflict, and coordinate large-scale projects? Monumental ritual may have been the solution. By constructing sacred enclosures, performing shared ceremonies, and feasting together, people forged bonds that transcended kinship. The pillars themselves, anthropomorphic and enduring, may have represented a kind of supra-tribal identity, a reminder that the community was larger than the sum of its bands. If so, Göbekli Tepe was not only a temple but a political experiment, the first architecture of large-scale human unity. The astronomical hypothesis adds another dimension. As noted earlier, researchers have proposed that the enclosures align with celestial events. Some suggest that the central pillars, with their anthropomorphic arms, represent the twin pillars of the sky, an axis mundi connecting earth and heaven. The repetition of animal motifs corresponding to constellations hints that Göbekli Tepe may have been a prehistoric observatory, a place where the cycles of the heavens were tracked and celebrated. The appearance of Sirius around 9300 BCE, for example, has been linked to potential alignments. If this is correct, Göbekli Tepe was both a temple and a calendar, encoding cosmic order in stone. For a society on the cusp of agriculture, such knowledge would have been vital, as celestial cycles govern planting and harvesting. Perhaps the most controversial theory frames Göbekli Tepe as a survival of older cultural knowledge, inherited from a pre-Holocene world. In this view, the builders were not simply experimenting with new forms of ritual, but were custodians of traditions that stretched back into the Ice Age. The symbolic system, the vultures, scorpions, snakes, anthropomorphic deities, may represent fragments of a cosmology preserved from an earlier civilization, one destroyed by the catastrophes of the Younger Dryas. The very act of carving myths into stone may have been an effort to preserve memory against the erosion of time, to record in enduring form what oral tradition could not carry intact. Critics of this idea argue that there is no need to invoke lost civilizations. Human creativity alone, even among hunter-gatherers, is sufficient to explain Göbekli Tepe. After all, symbolic art is well attested tens of thousands of years earlier in the cave paintings of Lascaux and Chauvet. Those paintings demonstrate that Ice Age peoples had the cognitive and symbolic capacity for complex representation. Why then should we be surprised that similar capacities were expressed in megalithic architecture at the end of the Ice Age? For mainstream archaeologists, Göbekli Tepe is not evidence of a lost culture, but the natural culmination of symbolic traditions already present in Paleolithic art. And yet, even this comparison highlights the site's singularity. Cave art was painted in hidden places, accessible only to initiates. Göbekli Tepe brought those symbols into the open, onto massive stone pillars, visible to hundreds at once. It transformed private ritual into public monumentality. This leap remains difficult to explain within conventional models. If hunter-gatherers had been capable of symbolic art for tens of thousands of years, why did they wait until 9600 BCE to build temples? Why then, and why there? Was Göbekli Tepe a spontaneous breakthrough, or the flowering of seeds sown earlier? Some scholars frame the debate in terms of necessity versus surplus. Monumentality requires both motivation and means. The motivation may have been religious, an overwhelming desire to communicate with the divine, to memorialize cosmic events, or to maintain social unity. The means, however, require labor and resources. For most of the Pleistocene, hunter-gatherers lacked the population density and environmental stability to support such projects. Only with the climatic stability of the Holocene, beginning around 9700 BCE, did conditions permit large gatherings. From this perspective, Göbekli Tepe was less a survival of the past than a product of opportunity, a sudden flowering when climate allowed it. But this argument too has weaknesses. The end of the Ice Age was not a time of stability but of upheaval, melting glaciers, rising seas, shifting ecosystems. It was precisely in this chaotic transition that Göbekli Tepe was built. If instability prevented monumentality earlier, why would it suddenly permit it then? Unless, of course, the builders were responding directly to that instability, encoding its memory into stone. If the Younger Dryas comet hypothesis has any merit, then Göbekli Tepe may have been both temple and testimony, a monument to survival, a warning in stone. What emerges from these competing theories is not a single explanation, but a plurality of functions. Göbekli Tepe may have been at once a ritual center, a social glue, an astronomical observatory, and a memory of catastrophe. Ancient monuments rarely served only one purpose. They were polyvalent, fusing religion, politics, astronomy, and identity. The pyramids of Egypt were tombs, symbols of power, and cosmic machines all at once. Stonehenge aligned with solstices, but also served as a ritual center and cemetery. So too, Göbekli Tepe may resist reduction, embodying multiple layers of meaning. The deeper question, however, is whether Göbekli Tepe was unique or representative. Was it a singular experiment by Anatolian foragers, or one expression of a broader, now vanished tradition? Ground-penetrating radar has revealed at least 20 enclosures at the site itself, of which only a handful have been excavated. Beyond Göbekli Tepe, other sites in the region, Göbekli Tepe, Nevalachori, Karahan Tepe, show similar but smaller-scale megalithic traditions. This suggests that Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated anomaly, but part of a cultural horizon spanning southeastern Anatolia. Whether this horizon itself was local innovation, or the echo of something older, remains the great question. For advocates of a forgotten global civilization, Göbekli Tepe is the smoking gun, a site that proves humans could build monumental structures long before orthodox timelines allow. For skeptics, it is simply the first step on the ladder, a remarkable but explainable leap within the broader trajectory of human development. Between these poles lies the possibility that Göbekli Tepe is both: a local innovation that also preserves fragments of older memory, a bridge between the Ice Age and the Neolithic, between myth and history. What cannot be denied is that Göbekli Tepe changed the story. Before its discovery, the idea that hunter-gatherers could build temples was inconceivable. After Göbekli Tepe, it is a fact. Whether temple, observatory, or memorial, the site demonstrates that the seeds of civilization were present long before the first cities rose. And if it could happen here, it could have happened elsewhere. Along coastlines now submerged, in plains, now deserts, in forests, yet unsurveyed. Göbekli Tepe is a beginning, not an end. If Göbekli Tepe astonishes us for what it reveals, it also intrigues us for what it hides. Few ancient sites present so many unanswered questions. After more than a millennium of activity, sometime around 8000 BCE, the builders did something extraordinary. They buried their temple complex beneath tons of soil and rubble. Unlike ruins abandoned to wind and rain, Göbekli Tepe was entombed with deliberate care. Its enclosures, once the center of ritual and community, were sealed away as though their continued presence was either too sacred or too dangerous to leave exposed. This single act magnifies the mystery. Why bury a place of such obvious significance? Archaeologists have offered several explanations. One possibility is ritual closure. Just as individuals are buried at death, so too might sacred places be interred when their function has ended. In this view, the burial was an act of reverence, a way of retiring monuments that had served their purpose. Another possibility is more practical. The rise of agriculture in the surrounding region may have shifted priorities. As people settled into villages and fields, the massive labor of maintaining Göbekli Tepe may have become unsustainable. Burying the site could have been a way of tidying the landscape, reclaiming the hill for other uses. Yet the effort required to move thousands of tons of soil suggests more than practicality. It suggests symbolic intent. A third possibility is that the burial represented a cultural break. The people who sealed Göbekli Tepe may have been rejecting the traditions of their ancestors, embracing new worldviews better suited to a farming life. In this interpretation, the act resembles the destruction of idols in later religious revolutions, when old gods were cast down to make way for the new. If so, then the burial of Göbekli Tepe marks not just an archaeological event, but a spiritual revolution. A turning point in human history when the ritual centers of the hunter-gatherers gave way to the fields and villages of the farmers. Whatever the reason, the burial preserved Göbekli Tepe for us in a way few sites are preserved. The enclosures, protected beneath layers of fill, survived with their carvings intact. When Klaus Schmidt uncovered them in the 1990s, It was as if a time capsule had been opened. The site became a revelation, not just for archaeology, but for humanity's sense of itself. Before Göbekli Tepe, the consensus held that temples, writing, and monumental architecture were products of farming societies. After Göbekli Tepe, that consensus could no longer stand. Humanity's symbolic and social complexity reached monumental expression thousands of years earlier than we thought. This revelation has had profound consequences for how we think about the past. For some, Göbekli Tepe has become a touchstone of alternative history. Authors and theorists who long argued for the existence of a lost civilization now point to the site as evidence that orthodoxy underestimated human antiquity. If hunter-gatherers could build such temples, then perhaps other older sites await discovery, or perhaps the builders themselves carried knowledge from even deeper antiquity. Göbekli Tepe does not prove the mother culture hypothesis, but it legitimizes the possibility by showing that the timeline is not as rigid as once assumed. For mainstream archaeologists, the site has provoked both excitement and caution. Excitement, because Göbekli Tepe expands our understanding of what humans were capable of. Caution, because it opens the door to speculation. Klaus Schmidt himself was careful in his conclusions. He called the site a sanctuary, a cathedral on a hill, but resisted linking it to lost civilizations. His interpretation emphasized the power of religion as a driving force for social complexity. For Schmidt, Göbekli Tepe demonstrated that spirituality, not subsistence, was the seed from which civilization sprouted. Whether one accepts this or not, the idea reshaped debates about the origins of human society. Since Schmidt's death in 2014, excavations have continued, uncovering new enclosures and refining our picture. Yet the core mysteries remain. Who built the site? How did they coordinate the labor? Why did they bury it? Each answer spawns new questions. The deeper we dig, the more elusive the truth becomes. The site refuses to be pinned down, standing as a reminder that the past is not a closed book, but a living puzzle. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe is more than a site. It is a symbol. It represents the fragility of orthodoxy, the suddenness with which new discoveries can overturn old certainties. It stands as a warning against assuming that absence of evidence is evidence of absence. For centuries, no one imagined that temples older than agriculture could exist. Now we know they do. What other assumptions might be waiting to be shattered? If Göbekli Tepe lay hidden until the 1990s, how many more ancient monuments lie beneath soil, jungle, or sea? Göbekli Tepe also resonates with the broader theme of this podcast, the search for the ghosts of a lost world. Whether or not it was the product of a forgotten civilization, it proves that our ancestors were capable of more than we assumed. It opens the door to the possibility that other sites, even older, may one day be found. It forces us to admit that human history is not a simple line, but a complex web full of forgotten branches. The rediscovery of Göbekli Tepe also reminds us of the role of chance in shaping history. Had Klaus Schmidt not recognized the significance of the stones in 1994, the mound might still be considered a Byzantine cemetery. Had the site not been buried, erosion might have destroyed it millennia ago. The survival of Göbekli Tepe is a fluke, a rare exception in a world where most of the past has been lost. This fragility underscores the central theme of preservation bias. For every Göbekli Tepe that survives, countless others may be gone forever. The silence of the record may conceal not emptiness, but erasure. The impact of Göbekli Tepe on our imagination cannot be overstated. For the public, it has become a symbol of mystery, often invoked alongside Stonehenge and the pyramids. For scholars, it is a challenge, demanding new theories of social organization, ritual, and the origins of complexity. For those who believe in a lost civilization, it is a vindication, proof that the Orthodox timeline is not unassailable. In every case, Göbekli Tepe has become more than a site. It is a story, a mirror in which we see our own assumptions reflected. In closing, Göbekli Tepe teaches us 3 lessons. First, that humans have always been seekers of meaning, capable of organizing labor and creativity in the service of the sacred. Second, that the past is more complex and surprising than the models we impose on it. And third, that the search for our origins is not finished. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe, carved 12,000 years ago, still stand, silent but eloquent, reminding us that we have forgotten more than we remember. They are not just relics of a bygone age, but voices from the dawn of civilization, calling us to look deeper, to question more, and to remain humble before the vastness of time. In the chapters ahead, we will continue this journey. From the mysterious terraces of Gunung Padang to the weathered flanks of the Sphinx, from the precision blocks of Pumapunku to the drowned ruins of ancient coastlines, we will explore the anomalies that challenge our story of the past. Göbekli Tepe is the beginning, the first great crack in the wall of orthodoxy. It shows us what is possible and hints at what is still hidden. The ghosts of the Ice Age await, and the path to them begins on a hill in Turkey, where the world's first temple still stands beneath the Anatolian sky.